Salam, friends. Today I have a really special guest with me. I'm really excited about this session. I have with me Kerim Guç, who is the son of my hodja Cemalnur Sargut, who's based in Istanbul, but has a lineage of following all across Europe and even in parts of America. Kerim himself was born in the lineage. His grandmother, his mother, they're both really refined teachers of Tasawwuf, of Sufism. And he has been a student of Sufism for the longest time. He's got a master's in Sufism from Uskudur University, and he's now working on a PhD, a doctorate in Sufism. Salam, Kerim, how are you?
Alaikum salam. I'm great. How are you?
So lovely to connect with you.
It's great to have you in Istanbul now. I think the best thing about this pandemic is that now we have actually a better connection with people.
I know, it's wonderful. And I was missing being in Istanbul, and talking to you now just makes me feel like I'm back in that vibration. Love it.
Right.
So to start with today, Kerim, I wanted to talk about the concept of tawakkul. Tawakkul being blind faith in God. We kind of live in a world, and culturally, we grow up with the notion that if something happens, if something goes wrong, if you experience a tragedy or a travesty, don't worry, have faith in God, everything will be okay. I feel like colloquially we say this a lot, but when it comes to actually believing in it and actually following the principles, I feel like there's a disconnect. Because if we really did believe and if we really did surrender, we wouldn't have sleepless nights, we wouldn't be suffering from stress, we would not be, in any kind of personal inner struggle. We'd just be like, okay, I surrender, I give in. But I just want to understand, what is it in the human psyche that can really open the mind to the idea of having that kind of infinite faith without question, really letting go, really surrendering, really believing from a deep place, as opposed to trying to control and navigate, even though we're saying verbally, you should just have faith in God, everything's going to be okay. You could shed some light on that.
Well, it's very difficult, especially for me. It's very difficult. I'm an engineer, first of all, so it's very difficult for us to understand the concept of blind faith. As an engineer, I really believe in the structural things, and it is very difficult for me to believe in something that I don't see. The name, the words Islam comes from the words of surrender. So for me to be able to surrender, I have to really understand him. Coming from the family of Tasawwuf, and my mother and my lineage, like you said, they're all very good surrenderers. My mother is also a chemical engineer. She used to give me this example of acid and base, basically, If you have acid in your hand and if you have base in your hands, they're all destructible things. When you actually put them together, what it comes from acid and base, you have now water and salt. By itself, like acid is very destructive. And when you actually connect those two, then you have salt and water. That's the most important, the essence of life, basically. So looking at our life, we have to be in balance. And to be able to in balance, that you have to understand what's really going on. There was a story, it's a Sufi story. His name is Moses. Moses is a person who was taught by a guy. His name is Sümbül Sinan. Sümbül Sinan, his teacher. His teacher asks this question to all his students. He says, if you have a chance, like the power of God, that you can change anything you want, what would you change? And the students, like one of the students says, if there are like 100 murders in this world, I would actually get rid of them. He asked the same question to another student. The second student says, like, if there are 100 people, they're stealing money, I would actually get rid of them. And the story goes like this. And at the end, Sümbül Sinan asks this question to Moses. And Moses says, if this guy actually gets rid of the 100 murders, I would take the 100 murders back into this world. And the same thing goes like the people for stealing. Because he says, the world as it is perfect. That if you try to actually mess with this harmony, you would actually mess with the whole harmony. And since you don't actually see the big picture, and the reason that we're actually trying to change things, or we're thinking that things are not fair, you know, because we don't see the big picture. We never can actually look things from the perspective of God, but we can actually believe that there is a big picture. And then when we actually leave it the way it is, there is another example that I would like to give, because it is very difficult to understand the physics, the metaphysics rather, looking at things from the physical world, because we live in a physical world and our brain works to understand things with comparisons. You know, we can compare things. If you would like to understand that we can look at this thing as a body, and the spirits that we are, all we are, we can consider them as organs. Like, I'm an organ myself in the body, in the metaphysics world, and let's say I'm a stomach, right? And you're as beautiful. You're like a face, right? My job is to actually produce enzymes and acids to destruct. But when I come to this world, I'm still a stomach, and people look at me as if I am a really bad person. Because, you know what I'm saying? Basically, I do my job as a stomach, but you're like a face, and you're beautiful. You come to this world and everybody says, oh, Tanya is beautiful, you know, and you do your job by itself. And let's say somebody in this world has the power of God and says, well, Kerim is bad as it is because he's a stomach. So let's get rid of him, right? And he would get rid of me, right? And everything goes back to the metaphysics. Imagine then there is no Kerim, there is no stomach. It goes back to the system as it is. And the system would not work at all without the stomach. So the stomach has its own job, and Tanya, as you beautiful face, has a job over there as well. So everything is in balance. Everything is in balance as it is right now. But since we don't see the big picture, we can't say that let's get rid of these things.
Yeah.
I haven't gone to the Tawakkul just yet. I'm just making my way into Tawakkul.
I love it. I love it. And what you're saying is giving me so much information. It's giving me so many ideas, because it's even reminding me that, wow, this is all connected. Because then the purpose, one of our purposes in being here is to enhance and, you know, grow our capacity to see, because we have a very limited way of looking at the world, and we need to expand. And perhaps we won't be able to expand as much, and never as much as God, of course, but our journey is to expand our perception. And it also reminds me of how the Quran always talks about gaining knowledge, gaining ilm. Therefore, the more we know, the more we know, the more we can see. Perhaps the less we know, because we realize, oh my God, I really don't know much, and there's so much more to know. So yeah, what you're saying is triggering so many exciting thoughts in my mind. Please continue.
Imagine there is a conversation in Quran. There is a conversation between Moses, the Prophet Moses, and Khidr, the green man, right? And the green man says, you cannot really understand me, and you're gonna be basically criticizing my behavior. And the Moses says, don't worry, I'll come with you. And then we go through this journey, and believe me, I'm not going to criticize you. And then you know the journey goes. There are three things, and I'm not going to go into details, but there are three things that Khidr did, and they look like really bad things from the Zahir, but
perspective.
Right, from the bottom perspective, from the inner perspective of things, he did the things that God asks him to do, but Moses said, no, these can't be fair, because what you did is not fair. You killed people. You killed a small child, right?
The holes in the boat, drop the wall.
Right, yeah. All those things look like he did bad things, really, from our perspective too. Even from the Moses perspective, he's a prophet. He's like God's man. But even from his perspective, he would not be able to see the big picture. And he criticized Khidr, and Khidr said, well, those are the things that God wanted me to do. I told you that you would not understand me. But at the end, Khidr was his teacher. But obviously that Moses found, he's a prophet, obviously. At the end, he understood all those things, the inner meaning of these things. But imagine that if Moses can't understand these, how would we understand these, the harmony that we don't see actually? God tells us that you're going to be seeing things from your perspective that it looks like they're going to be unjust or bad things, but you don't see the big picture. So at least believe in me blindly. When you say tawakkul, the blind faith, and then leave it to me. If you leave these things to me, I know the picture. So don't worry about these things. Of course, it's not possible for us. It's almost like impossible to actually leave us. And that's the whole reason that we're in stress. That's the whole reason that we're having these problems and all that. So from my perspective, like I said in the beginning, I'm a scientist from one angle, and from a different angle, I work on metaphysics. So I always have this clash between those two. But like my mother says, you have to be in the balance. It is like there are two things that actually motivate people. The two main things, I would say: the fear on one end and the hope on the other hand, right? In Islam, we have this concept of Sirat al-Mustaqim. Sirat means when we die and go to the other worlds, that you will pass a bridge, right? And the bridge is very thin. Sirat al-Mustaqim, the bridge, it's very thin. So if we were to, we know that it's a metaphysics, the world of metaphysics, and we're not going to be able to bring anything from this world, right? You're not going to bring your, gold. You're not going to be, taking your money. There's no house over there or anything like that. You don't bring anything from this world physically. But something that you can bring that's going to help you to pass the bridge is the balance, right? If you have a balance in your pocket when you go to the other world, then you can pass this bridge very easily, because all you need is the balance on the top of the bridge. It's very thin. So my mother says, one hand, the fear, the other hand is, the hope. In the middle, if you actually have the balance, that you can go straight. Now, as a scientist on one end is ilm on one end, and faith, iman, is on the other hand. If you balance those out, then you go straight. If one of them actually is more than the other, then you're gonna do circles, because one hand is gonna do this, the bird. You imagine the bird is flying, right? We're the bird, I am the bird. And it's always like the ilm on one hand, you circle. If only iman, only faith, one circle, right? Both them together, meaning the intellect and the heart, they have to shake hands for you to actually go straight, right? So tawakkul is something. One hand says, do whatever you need to do to accomplish this, right? Do it, you know, whatever you can do. Gayret, in Arabic, you know, in gayret. But on the other hand, you have to have faith too. That meaning that I want to do this, I want to accomplish this, right? But I don't see the big picture. Maybe this is something that is not good for me, right? But you still have to do what you have to do to accomplish it. But on the other hand, you say, well, if it didn't happen at the end, let's say, then that means now the fate, now the heart talks and says, well, maybe this is not good for you, right? And that's, you don't know the, you know, what was going to happen if it actually, if you had accomplished this, you wouldn't know whether this was going to be good for you or bad for you. But if your heart and your intellect, they shake hands and they say, okay, well, we're together on this, then you would not be unhappy at the end of the day if it doesn't work out for you. And tawakkul, from my perspective, it's as easy as it is, that do whatever you can, and if it doesn't happen at the end, just say, well, it was not going to happen. It didn't happen because God didn't want this to happen, and because this is actually good for me.
Actually, this is so interesting, and it makes me think about the fact that every single day that we wake up in the morning and we embrace the day, whether we realize it or not, we're actually living in blind faith all the time. You have a certain idea of what your day is going to look like. You had no idea that, you know, your car is going to get into an accident or some unexpected thing is going to happen. Every day we start with a plan and then something new comes our way. So it's so interesting to sort of go into a bit of a microcosm and look at things a little bit more carefully and say, even on a smaller micro level, we're actually living in tawakkul, in faith all the time. But we tend to think that, oh no, things are in my control. Things are going as I want them to go. That's why there's so much fear, there's so much stress. I mean, stress is the number one cause of all the diseases in the world. And people are stressed because they don't know. The uncertainty of life makes them feel completely at odds. They feel like they don't have a grip on life. And that's what's causing all this disease, all this health issues inside people. Meanwhile, we're living this reality. So it's so interesting. There's so many things to be a human being is like a full-time sport. It's like you have to have the wider perspective, and then you also have to zoom in and look at what's happening on a daily basis. You're actually living in a state of faith all the time, in a state of blind faith all the time.
Right. I actually don't use the word blind faith. That's for sure, because blind faith is actually some things that you get into blindly. You're actually not blind. I don't think you're blind. That's what I'm trying to say, actually, from the perspective as an engineer. You know, I just believe in it, and I'm not looking at it blindly, actually, because there is actually a reasoning behind that. There's actually an ilm behind that. The fact that we don't understand doesn't mean that there is no ilm behind that. You know what I'm saying? So it's not, I'm not blind, actually. I actually believe in it scientifically, actually. And that's how I look at it. So with this urge of being in control of everything is actually killing us. Because people have this urge and control. I have to control this. I have to control my life. I have to control the parameters of what's going on behind, you know, around us. And that's the thing that actually gives us stress. That's the thing that makes our life miserable. And if going back to tawakkul, meaning, okay, again, there are the parts of the coin, like say, you have to do whatever necessary to do to accomplish the thing. But if it doesn't happen, don't stress all over it, because that means that from the big picture, it shouldn't happen to begin with.
Absolutely. And I think that, in fact, I can tie it up to what we're experiencing right now in our lives. Look at with this lockdown, with this pandemic, our lives are completely taken from our hands. We didn't expect this, and we don't see an end in sight. You know?
Right. Exactly. And was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? From what perspective it's a bad thing? What is a good thing? Right now we're having this conversation because of it, because we thought that we have to be face to face to actually talk about these things. No, right now there are millions of people talking through these Zooms or internets or whatever, YouTubes, and that gave us the opportunity to actually discuss these things. And imagine, like, I'll give you an example, like Newton's principle came during a time of a pandemic, right? All those good things actually come during the time of these bad, see, that's what I'm trying to understand. What is bad? What is good, really? There is a story of Muhyiddin Ibn al-Arabi, that he went to a jungle and he saw these animals, the wild animals, and the wild animals get away from him, right? And he says, it's very normal. It's obvious that these are wild animals. They obviously, when they see me, they went away, right? Then he says, I thought about this, and I said, they were not the ones there. They were the wild ones. I was the wild one. As a human, I was the wild one because I lost my connection to this world, And this is exactly what happened. We're talking about 1200th century, and now we're on 2020, right? We lost the connection with the nature. And the nature says, you're the wild ones, the people, you're the wild ones. And if you don't behave, then I will take my revenge, and because I have to protect myself. And, these are the things that are coming up right now. We're thinking about these things. We started to think about these things.
What, from the perspective of the Tasawwuf, does one see the New World Order as? What kind of a world are we walking into? I mean, it's true that this has been a stopgap, and we are all looking at things very carefully. And it has been a humbling experience for mankind. And it makes one wonder, what is our world going to look like, perhaps, at the end of this, on the other side?
We're gonna see it. Hopefully, at the end of this pandemics, we're gonna see if we actually changed a little bit. And it really is in our hands, basically. And we're intellect. We have the intellect, and it's in our hands. And then we saw the bad things that can happen if we continue our bad habits. And I'm hoping that from this, we will understand that if we continue this, then we're going to end ourselves. So the New World Order is going to be actually to do things for the benefit of humanity.
And it seems like there will be people that are already on this path. There are many people in many influential positions that have had a moment to sit and really take stock and are also, recalibrating.
I agree. My mother used to say the year of 2012, there was a conspiracy, or there was like a,
Yes.
We were talking about, the world is going to end according to Mayan calendar or Inca's calendar. I don't remember which one was it. My mother used to say, the time is fast. Now with that year, the time is going to be faster and faster. So when there is everything, you know, turns. When the frequency is faster, you know, there are two types of forces that happens from that from that turning. One force takes you into the, you know, you're talking about like a circle, right? A circle. You know, one force takes you into this the center of the circle, right? The other force takes you out of the circle, right? So there are people that's going to go inside the circle, going towards the center of the circle, and the other ones are going to get out of the circle. And it gets faster and faster. The forces are going to be even, you know, bigger. So there are people that are going to be with the fate. When it comes to fate, when she makes this analogy, she says, the people with the fates, right? They're going to have more fates. So they come into the center of the circle. The people without the fate, they're going to continue not having faith, and it's going to get even worse and worse, and they're going to get out of the circle. It's still going to balance out. At the end of the day, everything balances out. That's how the nature works. It was a funny story that in Fusus al-Hikam is a book that was written by Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi. Arabi says the last human being, the perfect human being. There's a concept of perfect human being, right? That perfect human being is like, you know, after the prophet. The last prophet, as our belief is Muhammad, and after Muhammad, there's no other prophet. But there's still going to be people, human beings. They're so-called perfect human beings. We call them velis, and the last one is going to come from China, he said in his revelations or in his book. And so I was thinking about this COVID. You know, this is a 19 because the 19 is the symbol of the perfect human being at the same time. Well, it was a coincidence. Obviously, he's not the perfect human being, but the perfect human being is something that actually teaches you, right? Teaches you. So there was an analogy of this COVID-19 coming from China that teaches you a lot, you know. And so we're waiting for a perfect human being who's going to show you, you know, this is good, this is bad. But now we actually faced a virus, but the virus taught us a lot. It was funny because the number came from the China.
But you know, it is an interesting coincidence, and it also goes to show that human beings expect a teacher to come in a certain form. You know,
exactly. It doesn't have to be a human, right? Right? It doesn't have to be a human to teach you. It can be the nature that teaches you. It can be a book that teaches you. It can be anything that teaches you. The important thing out of this is you have to learn out of this thing, because these things gonna happen all the time. It happened before, it will happen in the future, and we already know these things. But the important thing is you learn out of these things. If you don't learn, then it's gonna happen again until it teaches you, until you actually learn it.
Oh my God, this was so enriching. I cannot thank you enough for your time. This was so enriching. Absolutely loved it.
It was great to see you actually, and even being able to actually talk to you from miles away. You know, I'm in Istanbul. We have a time difference, 7 hours time difference. Now, imagine how COVID gave us the opportunity to actually make this happen. So again, look, it's the perspective. It's a bad thing. Looks like a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. It gave us a lot of opportunity to actually connect. I was reading Eckhart Tolle lately, and there was a saying that he said, the caterpillar, when the caterpillar, from the perspective of caterpillar, before it dies, he looks at the world as I'm leaving this world, but the world looks at the situation as a butterfly coming to this world, right? Where the caterpillar dies, the butterfly comes to the world. So it was a beautiful analogy that he did, and we have this analogies all over the Sufi in the Sufi literature. Actually, if we think about this, we're never going to lose hope, because hope is something that actually makes our life better. We can still smile, and we can, if we look at these things and in a perspective that we're never going to go away.
Wow. Thank you, Kerim, so much for these wise words and for your time, and despite the time distance to make this possible. I look forward to more chats with you now.
I hope so. Inshallah. Inshallah.